Hello. Feeling not good enough is a feeling that nearly all of us experience at some point in our lives. Maybe it's related to work or school. Maybe it's in our personal lives. We've all had the feeling. Maybe you're in a new job and maybe you aren't getting the feedback you'd like. Or maybe in your personal life, you feel you haven't got it together compared to others. We don't want to feel not good enough. It's not a nice feeling. So we look for things that make us feel better. We watch TV. We avoid the area that makes us feel bad. We look for people who make us feel better about ourselves. And we look for information that makes us feel good about ourselves. So how do we manage this feeling? How do we manage the feeling of not feeling good enough? Well, if we want to improve it forever, sometimes a different approach is called for. Evidence shows that accepting negative feelings first can be very effective. For example, I'm feeling not good enough. I'm okay with feeling not good enough. And here's what I can do next. I think this is a great point for a story, so we're going to jump out. So a few years back, I was starting a new position, and I'd only had a few months of experience in the area, so I was pretty nervous to begin with. Everyone seemed to be able to do things so far ahead of me. They felt like they were light years ahead, and I was just like learning how to do basic tasks. I didn't even know how to use like Outlook, didn't even know how to use Teams at the time. So yeah, that was a bit of a learning curve. There was this one day that we'd fallen behind on a project, and I needed to ask my manager for advice because I didn't know how to do it for an important presentation. And we ended up having to stay back into the late hours of the night to complete it. And I began to wonder, like, is this really the role for me? So, how is it possible that other people could do things so easily and it was just so hard? It felt like a mountain for me to climb. And every day became a battle. Like I was having difficulties with sleep. I was sleeping more than usual, and I was starting to get more sick, and I needed to take some days off work because I was so anxious about things. I was worried about whether things would go right or things would go wrong or how I would be perceived. And, and I think this comparison thing where I compared to like other people in a similar position, and it always felt like they were so much better than me at what they were doing. So yeah, it sucked. It really sucked. And, you could argue a few different ways of what was the thing that sucked, what was really the problem. But like, I think really the problem that I felt was like, I felt like I wasn't good enough. I felt like I wasn't good enough, and I didn't know how to handle it back then. And it caused me a lot of issues. And I think I would have had a much more pleasant experience at work if I learned how to handle it. And I think this feeling of not good enough, or that experience of it, is part of the reason this program exists today. So picking up where we left off, we want to find a way to manage this feeling of not feeling good enough, and accepting it can be a very powerful technique. So I like to think of it as 3 goals. The first goal in accepting a negative feeling is like, often when we have a negative feeling, it feels like we're alone. Like when I feel like I'm not good enough, I feel like I'm the only one who is not good enough. And this aloneness makes it much harder to accept. So the first strategy, the first goal is to take strategies to feel less alone. And you can do that by talking to people about it. You can do that by checking if other people have similar feelings on Reddit. So, Reddit, does anyone else feel good enough? So you can click on one of these links. I've always felt that I'm not good enough, and the feeling is intensifying as I get older. And I like to read these, whether it be love, work, intelligence, looks. I've never felt that I'm good enough in these areas. I like to read these, not so much for the answers, but just to see if other people have a similar feeling to me. And it makes me feel a little bit less alone. I find it difficult to draw on any successes from my past, as there have been very few. It seems like I fail in most things I do. And for some reason, like this camaraderie feeling that someone else is in the same boat makes it a little bit easier to handle. So that's one technique, and that's looking at Reddit. Another story is you can write your story and ask if you feel alone to ChatGPT. So ChatGPT, hi, ChatGPT, I feel like at work I'm less capable compared to my peers. I often feel anxious about not being good enough. Am I alone in this? And so, hi there. Feeling anxious about not being as capable as your peers at work is a common experience that many people go through. You're definitely not alone in feeling this way. And I already find that helpful. I find that helpful to know that I'm not alone and to feel like I'm not alone, because there's even a syndrome for it. It's called imposter syndrome, and it affects people from all walks of life, regardless of their actual abilities or accomplishments. 2 strategies to feel less alone. And you can read the rest of it, but it's helpful for you even to write it yourself. And I'd encourage you to write both these things. If you're feeling, not good enough, actually write on Reddit. Search up your own version of this and write in ChatGPT your own version of, because we all have different flavors of the feeling of not feeling good enough. Second goal is acknowledge how you feel. You can do this by saying it out loud to yourself. You can doing this by writing it down, or you can also do it by saying it to someone you trust. These are some basic strategies for doing it. I like using OneNote. I feel not good enough at my work. And then just leaving that there. And that's just acknowledging how I feel. And I find that helpful as well. Okay, that's this one, acknowledging how you feel. So goal 3 is an interesting one. It's one where we try to take an activity where we're not running or fighting the feeling. And what do I mean by running or fighting the feeling? So for running from the feeling of not good enough, it's we try to leave the area. We try to avoid work or avoid the tasks that makes us feel not good enough and makes us like we want to work in a different area that feels better. And I think a classic one is like avoiding a hard piece of work and procrastinating and playing games that makes us feel good. So that's running from the feeling. The other one is fighting the feeling, where it's like we feel like we have to prove ourselves. I feel like I'm not good enough and I need to prove to everyone that I am good enough. And then that creates a different set of issues where maybe I work too hard and burn myself out and I become imbalanced. So we want to not run, we want to not fight the feeling. So what can we do? Well, basically, the idea is to sit with the feeling, to keep holding on to the feeling and have some kind of sensory experience to get us out of that headspace and into our body again. And a good strategy for this is like, okay, I don't feel good enough. I'm going to go for a walk. Or I'm really feeling like I'm not feeling that good enough. I'm going to have a warm cup of tea or a shower. Or I'm going to practice being present at the moment and just observing the things around me. And meditation is also very effective at this. Whichever strategy you use, the idea is we want to get used to this negative feeling without trying to do anything with it, without judging it. And getting used to the feeling of, okay, I feel not good enough and not needing to move. So like, if you do react to it, it's kind of like you're like a headless chicken. You're like a chicken that's had its head chopped off and, okay, it's gruesome. Okay, but you're just running. You're just running from a feeling and you don't really have a destination. So what we do want is to feel like, okay, I feel like I'm not good enough. What kind of destination would I like? And we can only do that once we stop running or fighting. And these are some effective strategies for that. So this might not be obvious, but hopefully pain to bored is value. Hopefully right now you're feeling a little bit bored, and at the beginning you felt a bit of pain with the feeling of not feeling good enough. But bringing feelings that are strongly negative to neutral or boring create a lot of value. What you couldn't before, now you can. You can now relax and enjoy. You can think about how to improve your skills, and you can think about what kind of goals you want to achieve. We can also realize that we don't have to be perfect at everything and be more compassionate with ourselves. These are all very valuable things that can happen where we go from some kind of strong negative feeling. We just take a few simple strategies, a few simple steps to make it feel less lonely, to help us acknowledge it, to help us not run from it. And all of a sudden, it's a little bit more neutral. And we can think about what we actually want now. We can be that mindful chicken we want to be. Okay, thank you.